All right, on your screens, in fact, now J.D. Vance is addressing the dignitaries present. Let's quickly listen into what he's saying before I come back to my guests.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for making this possible. We love you. We wouldn't be here without you, and we're going to make America great again together for the next 4 years. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, having stood outside for about 5 minutes to wave goodbye to the Bidens, thank God we moved that thing indoors because it was a beautiful ceremony and it was cold as hell outside. So, sir, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
No, he's right. I looked, I said, oh, look at this beautiful sunny day. We blew it, and then I went outside and we were freezing. You would have been very unhappy. The sun was very deceptive, I will tell you. It is cold out. And I'm sort of saying, you know, that was so beautiful today. Maybe they should do it there every 4 years. Does that make sense? I don't know. Because, you know, the outdoor thing is really good, but it gets a little cold around this time of the year, as some people have noticed. And a lot of times they suffer through it. There was no suffering in that room. It was 72 degrees. It was perfect with the best acoustics I think I've ever heard in a room. This is not so bad either. But I just want to say, you're a younger, far more beautiful audience that I just spoke to. And I want to keep it off the record. I want to keep that off the record because I don't want to have all those big shots up there. I don't want to think you're more powerful than them, you look better than them, and I love you. Now, we just had a great time. We just had a great day. This was amazing. You know, when you think we took a journey, I mentioned in the speech, a lot of people said that was not a journey that was possible, and it was indeed possible. I didn't really know too much about what they were saying when they said that, but a lot of people felt it. And we hooked up with J.D. very early. I watched J.D. over a period of time. I endorsed him in Ohio. He was a great senator and very, very smart. The only one smarter than him was his wife. That was, I would have chosen her, but somehow the line of succession didn't work that way, right? But now she's great and he's great. This is a great, beautiful couple and unbelievable career. I just said to him, you are very upwardly mobile, because he hasn't been doing it that long, but he picked it up so quickly. Remember, the first week was a little bit like the fake news was hitting him really hard. And I said, ooh, this may be tough, but after that, it was smooth sailing for him. He took on everybody. He took on the meanest. I don't want to use the word corrupt because we're into a new system, so let's wait till the corruption begins, because it will. But he took on some pretty mean people, and he handled it well. I want to also congratulate Mike Johnson for the job that he's doing. Steve, we gave him a majority of almost nothing, and then I said to make it tougher on him, let me take 2 or 3 of the people, right? I said he'll only have to suffer with that for about 3 months. How are they doing, by the way? Are they? Is that moving along?
Totally unified.
I said, do you mind if I take this one, that one, and a couple of others? He didn't mind. He can handle it. No, he's a man that's liked by everybody. I've never met a man like this. You've got how many is it, 219 or 220 or something? 220. And of the 220, 219 really like him. I noticed he got 1 negative vote once about 2 weeks ago. But I think even 220 like him, if you want to know the truth. And that's very unusual. I know a lot of nice guys in Congress, and they have 35 people that hate him. So if you have 35 people that hate you and you only have 1 or 2 or 3 votes, you'll have 5, I think. But that's going to be like, you know, the good news is when we get to that 5 number, it's going to feel like a massive majority. You could be really nasty to a couple of them at least, you know? So it's going to feel like hitting your head on the wall and stopping. It feels so good to stop. But he's done a fantastic job. And Steve Scalise is, he's our hero because, you know, I was with him. You talk about being shot. I was with him. He got some bad ones, and his incredible wife. And she really loves him. You know, you never know about that. I've been with other people. They were doing poorly, and the wife is like looking at her watch. She can't get out of the hospital fast enough. How's he doing? Oh, I don't know. He's all right. That woman was a mess. She was crying and crying. No, they're going to take him. They're going to take him. I told Steve when he finally woke up, it was a while too. The doctor told me it was the most blood they've ever transfused in any patient. They've never done anything like it. And here he is, the picture of strength, right? And he's been a great friend of mine, right? With a family, because of a family. And what a job you did. It worked out pretty much better than we even thought, right? And I did have a couple of things, you know, to say that were extremely controversial. And between J.D. and Melania and anybody else that heard, please, sir, it's such a beautiful, unifying speech. Please, sir, don't say these things. I said, I'm telling you, it's going to play great. They say, you're right. For this group of people, it's going to play great. You're the only ones I hurt by not, oh, but we had some beauties, didn't we, Melania? She said, sir, calls me sir when she's angry. No, I'm only kidding. I better say I'm only kidding, or the press is going to pick that one up loud and clear. No, but she said, no, I think it would be terrible. It's such a nice speech. I think it's, you know, it all depends on your delivery. How was the delivery? Was it good? But she said it's such a beautiful speech. You can't put things in there that you were going to put in. And I was going to talk about the J6 hostages, but you'll be happy because, you know, it's action, not words that count. And you're going to see a lot of action on the J6 hostages. See a lot of action. And I was going to talk about the things that Joe did today with the pardons of people that were very, very guilty of very bad crimes, like the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, where they literally, I mean, what they did is they destroyed and deleted all of the information, all of the hearings, practically not a thing left. They deleted all the information on Nancy Pelosi having turned down the offer of 10,000 soldiers. You wouldn't have needed 10,000, you could have had 500, and it would have stopped. Because we may have had 1 million people that day, the people that were there. You don't see any photographs, but we have a lot of great photos. But you don't see those photographs. They don't put them in. They show the people at the Capitol. But I was talking about that. I was going to talk about that. They said, please don't bring that up right now. You can bring it up tomorrow. I said, how about now in front of the I'll bring it up right now. You know, this little time delay is good because we're getting great reviews on the speech. Now watch. They'll take the speech and say, I didn't like it because he left there and he talked to people. But we're giving you a little more information than we gave upstairs. But no, they pardoned a lot of people. They pardoned, before we even get to today, they pardoned, 33 murderers, absolute murderers, the worst murderers. You know, when you get the death sentence in the United States, you have to be bad because they don't give it much. And he pardoned almost everybody having a death sentence. And if you went through the crimes that were committed, you wouldn't even believe them, the level of violence, the people that were killed, the innocence of people that were killed and children killed by these people. And he pardoned them for whatever reason. He spared them, but they didn't spare the people that they killed. And, you know, who knows what happens in the future. It's one of the worst because a lot of times they let them out early after that. You know, they say you're going to be in for life, but then all of a sudden they get let out for good behavior and then they go on a rampage. You know, it's one of those little things, right? But I was going to talk about that. But I was really going to talk about the level of, you know, what's going on. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to help a guy like Milley? Why are we doing Milley? He was pardoned. What he said, terrible what he said. Why are we?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what you're listening to is a series of speeches that Donald Trump will be giving through the course of what is heading into the day in Washington. It's gone past midnight where I'm sitting in New Delhi. There are inaugural balls taking place, and he's going to be attending at least 3 of them where he'll be making these speeches. Let's break away from that because we've got a lot to discuss. Scott Faulkner is still with us. Gilbert Doctorow is with us. Matt Tarpe and Daniel Wagner all with us. And it has been a flurry. Could not have been as well setting the stage for a lot of very, very complex conversations. Not only from immigration to the changing of the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the United States government officially recognizing only 2 genders. Well, let's get cracking. Scott Faulkner, if there was a wish list for the people who were cheering on behind him from Elon Musk and the others, he has not pulled any punches on day one.
That is absolutely correct. I mean, it was actually much more of a State of the Union message where you list your agenda and what you're going to do versus an inaugural address, which is usually more lofty themes and lofty rhetoric. So Trump really is getting down to business very quickly. I'm sure in the next couple hours, he'll be signing the first of what will be 200 executive orders to put into action and into law what he just said on his inaugural address.
Okay, so I'm going to take it piece by piece with everyone, but I want for people watching the telecast to understand, before we come into the national emergency on the southern border, an executive order, Scott Faulkner, what purpose does it serve? Considering it comes under congressional oversight. It's not a blank check to the US president. So if he signs 200 executive orders, how useful are they?
Very useful, because unless it is truly unconstitutional, and again, I'm sure a number of left-wing groups in America will try to take some of these to the courts fairly quickly. And because of the DC government area are very left-wing, some of those courts will probably rule against it and we'll have to move up the appellate line. But what it does is it really is a set of marching orders, in essence, to the executive branch to move on these things immediately. So unless there's injunctions to stop these actions from a federal court, he is going to be able to move and mobilize a lot of these issues. And certainly the border issues, the cartels that have permeated America, the crimes by illegals that have spread out through our cities in America.
Okay.
These are things which
okay, Mr. Faulkner,
really
now let's take it one at a time. Okay, let's start with the biggest ticket item, invoking an emergency at America's southern border. That's the American border with Mexico. Now, Donald Trump has done this before. In 2019, that's where the funding to start building the wall came from. Now, invoking an emergency gives the United States president, it's unusual but not unprecedented. Joe Biden invoked an emergency when it came to student loans just 2 or 3 years ago. There are 60 recurring emergencies that were invoked. Some of them have been going on for decades, that keep on getting reinstated year after year. But now he gets certain executive powers. So this invoking of an emergency is many orders above signing an executive order. Scott Faulkner, come tomorrow morning, what authority will Donald Trump put unto himself, and what will he use it for on the southern border?
Well, his border czar, Homan, will be mobilizing U.S. troops to go down to the southern border and back up Customs and Border Protection agents, and to be able to immediately start rebuilding and expanding the wall. There's also going to be actions taken, probably starting in places like New York City, where we actually have a Democrat mayor who would like to clean out the criminals, to begin arresting and deporting criminal aliens. And these are, again, about 750,000 people who are in this country illegally, who have committed crimes in this country since their entry, from murder, drug dealing, smash and grab thefts. And these are all people that are beholding to the cartels. Also, the whole issue of declaring the cartels.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that next. I'm going to come to that next, because the step one is to give himself powers to do these things so that they do not get stuck back in Congress. So this big item is the emergency powers, which free up military construction spending, which also free up a whole list of statutory powers to the president. So let me now pick up that conversation because it's a fundamental question. Daniel Wagner. So now we thought he's going to do it. Now he's done it. Okay. Now it's a decision which you'll probably be finding unpopular, but it has to then come to the point of what happens with 750,000 people that have been identified as illegal aliens in the United States. Can they be deported? And will the countries of origin accept them? How can this actually be achieved? What's the devil in detail?
So there are a fair amount of unknown unknowns with all of this. And that is something that not too many people are spending a lot of time talking about. They're just presuming that Trump is going to wave a magic wand and all of this stuff is going to magically happen. One of the considerations is the funding, of course. Where's the funding going to come from? And there have been discussions in the weeks preceding the inauguration in America about that very question and the expectation that it's going to cost many billions, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars to do everything Trump wants to do with the removal of illegal aliens. Let's not forget, there's 11 or 12 million of them to everyone's understanding. And the cost to get that done would be staggering. You raised another good point, which is, will these various countries accept them? And if they will not, where will they be sent? That is something that has yet to be defined.
Daniel, but is there reasonable consensus now that it is a problem, that this is a concern, it's an issue, and it's not necessarily dependent on which side of the political aisle you sit on?
Yes, is the short answer. I think that particular issue, the illegal immigration issue, transcends red and blue lines, Democrat and Republican lines in America. Anyone who lives here can see what the problem is, whether it's homelessness or people taking undue advantage of emergency rooms or whatever it might be, other forms of state and federal aid that could be allocated for other things. Some people are saying that in whatever it is that needs to be spent will ultimately save money in the long term because those problems will then have been removed or at least minimized. I think there are two basic issues that got Trump elected. One is the economy, and the other is the border situation and the illegal aliens.
Okay.
And so I think there's broad consensus on
Okay,
that.
so you accept that there is consensus, it's a problem. Okay, now we can argue that what is the cost of deporting people versus what is the cost of housing them in the United States with the public exchequer bearing the burden. Now that's a more complicated argument. The devil, of course, is in the detail. How will it be done? And how quickly can it be done, and how reasonably it can be done, and how, of course, humanely it can be done. These are human beings, not just a statistic. Let me get Matt into this conversation. Mr. Tape, now emergency powers gives Donald Trump what authority tomorrow morning to start acting versus talking?
I think that the reason that he's pursuing this sort of unilateral action with the emergency powers is to avoid having to go to Congress to try to do this through the legislative process, because undoubtedly, as we saw with the Obama administration, his top priority was, in addition to the recession, was healthcare, and he went to Congress and ended up not really getting exactly what he wants. Or actually exactly what he wanted. So I think Trump is pursuing this sort of unilateral action with the emergency powers so that he's able to get something that's more closely to what he wants. Now, the specifics, as was mentioned a few minutes ago, are yet to be determined. So this is something that Trump has done before and is something that led to the partial completion, the partial building of the southern border wall. So I think that the idea is to marshal the resources of the federal government, and this allows Trump to do that while sort of sidestepping Congress as he did in the past. So it's
so that's the Congress. Then there, of course, there is something called the court system in the Supreme Court. Are you expecting a long drawn out legal challenge, as we've seen in the past in Trump 1.0. Are you expecting this to be challenged in the courts, perhaps all the way up to the Supreme Court?
Yes, almost undoubtedly. I mean, it's hard to imagine why wouldn't it be challenged this time. And so a lot of the executive orders, the unilateral action that Trump is proposing, it's going to be constrained by what the court decides. I mean, you could see this also with his proposal to end birthright citizenship, right? So there's a significant constitutional question that's going to have to be addressed by the court, and I suspect that that's going to give the Trump administration a lot of trouble. So
All right.
I do think it will.
Okay, ending birthright citizenship is talked about during the campaign and post the election. He's not mentioned it today. It might happen. We don't know. So now let me get Gilbert Doctorow in. Gilbert Doctorow, what is the carrot and stick that can be applied for the countries of origin of these illegal immigrants for them to take them back?
Well, you're asking a foreign policy question, and that foreign policy is my forte. But this question is not something that I have studied or want to comment on. I just would like to use this moment to say that there was surprisingly little in the way of foreign policy indications in this speech. Just a few hints here and there. Yes, he wants to take back the Panama Canal, and a little hint at perhaps Greenland by mentioning that it's an American tradition of territorial expansionism, and praising McKinley and that golden age of American expansionism, which was reached its peak, I suppose, under Teddy Roosevelt, whom he also mentioned in passing. But I would like to take a step back to the comments of a previous speaker on how the Americans across the board are in favor of expelling the illegal migrants and of closing the borders. Yes, Americans across the Republican board. The country is split 50-50. There's no two ways about it. This is two countries we're talking about. And all of the values that Mr. Trump was celebrating are not shared by half the country. Expelling the foreigners, the illegal immigrants, protecting the borders, this is precisely what Biden did not do, not by accident, but by intent. And let's be frank about it. The Democrats are globalists. Globalists believe in free movement of people. This is not an accident. It is an ideology. And Mr. Trump stands against that ideology.
Okay, now regardless of ideology or not, now we are in it. Now let's take an example, Mr. Doctorow, of who all has attended the inaugural ceremony, because the issue of illegal immigration, migrants is an issue wherever we are sitting in the world. It's an issue for me in politics here in this country, in India, because we have immigration coming in from our neighboring states. So by roping in a Nigel Farage, the only British politician invited to all the inaugural balls, okay? The German Chancellor not there, the UK Prime Minister who's been in Ukraine sending a different note just a few days ago, not there. The recent comments of Elon will have some sort of a cabinet rank position now in government, we suspect, on what he said about Germany and other places. What is it setting the trend, even though it's not a foreign policy specific issue, but certainly it is an administration indicating of what they feel are their friends globally and who they're not?
It is too early to draw any conclusions or to make any projections on what the foreign policy of Mr. Trump will be. The only thing that resembled a foreign policy statement in this speech was his statement that he wants to make America still more exceptional. Regrettably, that's the one thing the country needs last. It is a rejection of a multipolar world. It is an assertion of American global hegemony in a different form. But it comes to the same thing as Mr. Biden's globalism. This is the problem, and it's a problem for you in India as well as the rest of the world. If America is going to dictate, which is what Mr. Trump is doing in his approach to the Panama Canal or in his approach to Greenland, then the whole world is going to have problems.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Doctorow, that George Soros is a problem for us here in India, and Biden just gave him a U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom. Gosh knows why. Maybe our definition of problems is a bit different. But let me pick up the second item with Mr. Scott Faulkner. Mr. Faulkner, now, foreign terrorist organizations, the trafficking cartels. What authority does this give to the US president to now crack down on what he feels are the priorities? You and I can have a different opinion. What authority does this give him?
It lets him freeze all sorts of financial assets. It allows him to better align not only FBI and Homeland Security resources, but even CIA and other international resources to crack down on the cartels. We know that the cartels are at least active in 40 US cities right now. That's human trafficking, drug trafficking, smash and grab, thefts. When a lot of these people come into the country, they literally are, when they pay the coyotes to come across the border, it's basically a loan that they have to pay back, and they pay it back through criminal activity. And so these cartels are a fundamental existential threat to Americans in general and to these 40 cities in particular. And so by declaring them a terrorist organization, it opens up every single avenue of intelligence gathering, National Security Agency, and other agencies tapping phones without needing court orders, again, freezing assets, doing all sorts of raids without necessarily needing to get warrants. But the other part is because they are international in scope,
Okay.
you can start to muster international resources.
Okay, let me jump straight into the next one and get the others in as well. Scott Faulkner, we are being told that the United States under Donald Trump is going to exit the Paris Accords on climate change. He's going to scrap the Green New Deal. He's going to revoke the EV mandate. Now, I understand, frankly, the pragmatism of some of these decisions, but surely there is a global crisis that we need to be heading in the other direction, not this direction.
The issue that he said after talking about revoking the EV mandate is people should be able to buy the cars they want. They should be able to buy the hot water heaters they want. They should be able to buy the stoves and ovens they want. The federal government has been incredibly intrusive into the marketplace to basically foist on the American public an agenda that's frankly ideological. When you look at the fires in California, worst fires happened in 1938. When you look at global warming, when you look at all these other issues, there was a little ice age up through the 1815, and a lot of the warmth that came after the little ice age had nothing to do with industrialization. It is not a science, it is an ideology. And so many of us who supported Trump recognize that you do not turn the world upside down or America upside down for an ideology.
All right, there's something to it because Daniel Wagner, we are expecting an Elon Musk to have a cabinet level kind of position in this administration. He's the man who's telling us that EVs are the future. Donald Trump is saying, yes, but government ain't going to tell you to buy them.
Right. So freedom of choice is one of the hallmarks of what will be the second Trump era. We've seen that in the social media arena as well. Where Musk is concerned, there's no question that he's going to play an oversized role in the Department of Government Efficiency. But I do find myself wondering, how long is it going to be before there's a falling out between Musk and some of these other folks, these big titans of technology? Because if we just look at the first Trump era, we saw that he had a falling out with just about everybody in his cabinet, just about everybody who was senior in his government. And one slip of the tongue by one of these folks, and Trump could have a change of heart because he is a very erratic decision maker. But until that time comes, my expectation is that Musk is going to have, 2 or 3 full-time jobs, as if he has so much time to spare as it is. And I think we'll see some interesting things that will be done. I think we're going to see some substantive things that will be done at the outset as they make their mark.
Matt Tarpe, come in on this because let's get into what was a long conversation. It was an election promise, and here it is, the Department of Governmental Efficiency. It's a dream that anybody in a democracy full of bureaucracy aspires to. We all understand how frustrating government systems can be and how inefficient they can be. Now, is there a consensus that there is inefficiency in the government systems and Musk and Ramaswamy need to be given a freer hand to cut it down?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people certainly can identify inefficiency in the federal government. I think it's one of these issues like, federal spending. If you ask people the question, does the United States government spend too much money? A lot of people say yes. But then when you get down to the specifics and ask you what specific type of spending do you want to cut, then it's very difficult to get a majority who favor cutting spending on the things that we're actually spending money on. And so I think the question will be, what ultimately are they going to do? Because I think, government efficiency, it'd be unlikely that there's a lot of people who are opposed to the U.S. government becoming more efficient. But there's probably a lot of people that are going to be opposed to the government becoming more efficient by doing specific things that Musk and or Trump are going to propose through the new department. So I think the specifics are going to matter. It's going to matter what they ultimately end up doing.
Let's do a reality check. $1.8 trillion is where the U.S. deficit is expected to stand. Scott Faulkner, now that's an insane sum of money. But the bottom line, and what Matt is telling us, that it comes the devil in the detail. It's nice to say government spending should be cut, but nobody will ever agree on what should be cut. Scott Faulkner. Yes, go ahead. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, there are 73 inspector generals plus our Government Accountability Office that issue reports every year to the Congress and to the public. And every year they find almost $700 billion in waste through mismanagement. Our own Defense Department just failed its 7th audit in a row where they can't even document where a lot of the money goes.
In the billions.
All right, let's look at cuts. Walmart, one of the biggest private companies in the world, has only 4 layers of management between the person sitting there checking you out and the headquarters staff in Arkansas. There are parts of the Defense Department have 23 layers of management. 23 layers. That's insane. The other day, Pete Hegseth said that when America won or helped win World War II, we only had 6 4-star generals. We now have 44 4-star generals. This kind of expansion of management overhead and layers of overhead that have no value whatsoever is the kind of stuff we can go after.
But Scott Faulkner, what is possible? This is not the private sector, and Elon can't go there and set up a town hall and sack 80% of the workforce like he did in X. Now, you can argue X is working just fine subsequently, so there was wasteful expenditure, but that's the private sector. You can do it. You can sack people overnight. That's not how government functions. Now, there'll be contractual employees, and there'll be people with long-term employment and who will have to work out pensions, and golden handshakes will have to be figured out. Perhaps the matter of reducing government will also come at a very expensive bill. So are we expecting too much? This is a nice headline, but nothing much.
When I was with Reagan, I walked into the door of our General Services Administration, which does all the procurement and leasing and operations of the federal government, with 36,000 employees. We did a hiring freeze. We didn't fire people, we did a hiring freeze, and we knocked that place down to 12,000 employees in a 4-year period. When I was the Chief Administrative Officer of the House, I had 12 layers of management. I had 1,200 people. I walked out the door with only 600 people, and we saved sustainable $5.5 billion because we outsourced things. We removed all these layers of management. I've done it inside the federal government. It can be done. You just have to do it with a laser as opposed to an axe. But it can be done and has been done, and it must be done.
Okay. So now on that note, let me now pick up another tangent because there are global affairs and let me get Gilbert Doctorow into this. Gilbert Doctorow, you've just heard Donald Trump announce a few things. First, he calls January 20th to be declared, I'm sure by his supporters, as Liberation Day. He says, I want to be remembered as a man of peace. We will build the greatest armed forces, but we will not judge ourselves by the battles we win, but the wars that we don't fight and don't get stuck in defending other people's borders. That's pretty clear. What's it indicating?
Well, it's not entirely clear what it's indicating because one of the problem with the American defense budget, and you're speaking about what, 20% of the total U.S. budget?
$800 billion, yes.
$800 billion. The problem with that is the bases around the world, all of which support the notion of America's global policeman role. They also provide America with wars everywhere because it puts its heavy thumb on the balance in every country where those bases are and gets involved in local conflicts, in local struggles for power. So if you want to cut the budget, it's very nice to speak about downsizing the bureaucracy, but that isn't addressing the really big numbers. $5 billion here. These are errors in bookkeeping when you look at the federal defense budget. The defense budget can be cut drastically if we stop paying for toilet paper for all those bases around the world and spend some money on developing advanced cutting-edge technologies to catch up with a country like Russia, which has done a great deal on a budget, defense budget, that was 10 times less than the United States. So there is a vast opportunity to save and to become have a legacy of peace and unifier, which were also part of his address today.
Okay, 750 bases the Americans have. The next in line, if memory serves me right, is the UK, which still has 100 plus. For reference to context, the Chinese have maybe 2 or 3. So that puts it power projection in perspective for people watching. But okay, let's come down. He doesn't want to fight other people's wars. What's he saying? What does that tell us about Ukraine? Is that now done? Can Ukraine still expect monies to be coming in from the Americas?
Very unlikely. Everything leading up to this day, the statements that he has made in the last 2 weeks in particular, indicate that he wants to stop the funding. There are two initiatives that I see going through the political establishment in the States right now. One is the question of continuing support, and the second is, is made contingent on the Ukrainians taking the mobilization age down from 25 to 18. And the second issue is that they have elections. I think the way out, the off-ramp for Mr. Trump, is to insist on the elections, because the regime in Kiev will collapse. Mr. Zelensky has no chance of re-election. And that will end the American obligation to defend a country that is proving itself to be anything but a democracy.
Tough one. Scott Faulkner on Ukraine.
What's unfortunate with Ukraine is that no matter what Biden said, he didn't give them the right equipment at the right time. And so and of course, the only reason that Russia invaded Ukraine was our weakness and incompetence in getting out of Afghanistan. There are ripple effects. When you start to look at the world, you have to think of it holistically, because our enemies think of it holistically. They're all interconnected. North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, and all the other Islamic terrorist organizations, they're all interconnected. We need to start pulling the threads out on one of them, and all the rest will come to heel. So I'm looking forward to Saudi Arabia and Israel expanding the Abraham Accords. I'm looking at us removing all of the supports that Biden put in place for Iran and bringing them to heel. I'm looking forward to a robust American energy policy, pulling the revenue rug out from under Russia. I think all these pieces are going to all interconnect, and Ukraine in particular, I mean, that's obviously at the front line, but they need better equipment than they have. They've been doing amazing things with drones and robots, and we should be looking at that for modernizing our own military.
They've changed the
but
way
there's a
all
lot
of
of
us.
pieces to
Yeah, they've changed the way all of us perceive war. Drone warfare, all the experiential lessons are being learnt in the Ukraine fronts as we speak, and that applies for all of us. Daniel Wagner, quick thoughts on Ukraine. I know our time is short.
Is that, yeah,
Daniel,
my view
yeah,
also
Daniel, yes,
is
go
that,
ahead. Yeah.
sure. My view also is that the funding is very unlikely to continue. The prevailing view in Washington these days, certainly from today, seems to be that the Europeans should take care of the funding. It's on their doorstep. And that is what the Europeans are going to have to do if they want to continue this war, because I really don't see the support in the US Congress.
Matt, if there were any strategic objectives to be gleaned for the United States of America and Ukraine, have they been reasonably met? Have Russia's forces, as has been claimed, been reasonably exhausted or depleted? Has the point been proven?
I'm going to have to defer to the foreign policy experts in the room. That's not really my area of expertise. So I'll defer to Gilbert on that question.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. I'm going to thank Scott Faulkner, Daniel Wagner, Matt, and Gilbert Doctorow for joining us on the broadcast. Mark Sofer is joining us next. He's been a former Israeli ambassador. Erin Watson, the CEO of Baker & York, joining us, and Adrian Calamel, who's a fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute, joining us very, very shortly to pick up this conversation on the other side. We take a break. See you in 30 seconds.